Hello and welcome to Wellbeing in Action. We are coming today with our third show and you are welcome to join us. I'm here with Steve for a little bit of conversation today, and today the conversation will involve a lot about my well-being. What I want to say is that we're going to talk a little bit about how I got to be here and to enjoy this chance to be discussing and talking to you guys about well-being in action. So good afternoon, Steve.
So Dani, tell us, do you like talking about yourself?
No. So it's been a bit of a torture in a way. I don't necessarily like about talking about myself. I like talking.
Yes.
About everything and possibly how to apply different things. So this is why I do have a show that talks about well-being in action. So,
but you are very self-critical.
Yes, I am self-critical.
Maybe overcritical?
In some ways, I think it's more over-analytical than over-critical. I am at a place in life, or I am at a time in my life where I am recognizing where I'm being overly critical, but I am still very analytical.
Right. So the thought of you having to analyze your life, who you are, where you are, what you've done, what you've achieved, how's that making you feel right now?
When I have to do that in front of everyone or in another language, I think that's where the challenge is coming. My concern is that I'm not going to be able to be as clear as I would have liked, maybe because it is a second language. But that goes to all of you guys. If you are watching us and English is also not your first language, you will understand where I'm coming from and where sometimes it is very challenging to express feelings or even to express ideas when the language itself, or sometimes where the language or the cultural barrier may be an issue. I wouldn't say it's a problem. So thank you for that. That has made it so much easier.
Good. Well, you chose to frame all of these conversations around Jordan Peterson's 12 rules.
Yes.
And the 3 rules we're going to look at today are rules 7, 8, and 9, which is pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient, tell the truth or at least don't lie, and assume that the person you are listening to might know something that you don't. Mm-hmm. And in framing these at this conversation around these rules, of course, it can help us to make the conversation flow. Yeah. Remember, we're not promoting and we're not disregarding these rules. We're just using this. So, in a sense, just as a question, does this type of thing help and make it easier for you to open up in conversation when you know what the frame, you know what the box of the conversation is?
Yes. My intentions, and when I actually thought about using the book, it was very interesting because I actually had a slightly different outcome than I had intentionally or at the beginning. The objective was to frame the conversation, so in that we agree. But I thought of using this book for a Brazilian culture, or very much embedded in that culture and the culture that we're living now. By the way, I'm speaking from Brazil.
Because, of course, in the Western European culture, Jordan Peterson means something a little bit more, a little bit different.
Yeah, and it's different. That's the best word, I think. And then when we discussed that, and when I brought it across even to our children and to friends that lived in England, and I have lived abroad for 18 years, but we have been married for 24 and together for over 25. So, it's been a long time where I know the culture and I understand the different cultures. So,
talking of your culture then, let's go right back to the beginning.
Okay.
Let's go back to Dani. So tell us about where you're from, where you grew up, your childhood and your family and your early memories.
I grew up in Jaú, which is a small town considering size of Brazil, very traditionalist, and I didn't know that until I left. But I grew up in Jaú knowing that I wouldn't stay there forever, and this was very interesting because there wasn't the universities around, so I knew I would need to leave home.
Okay.
And that was the upbringing.
Did you live in an apartment, a house?
I lived in a house for most of my life, and then after I've left home, and I was only 17 when I left home to go to Piracicaba, this town that we live in now, to finish my studies before getting to university.
So what about your childhood? What's your family made up?
It was my father, my mother, and me and my two brothers. Most of my cousins are male cousins, and there is a contextualization to this. So yes, I've always felt like the only girl of the family.
And where are you in the family?
Middle. I'm the second.
What's it like being the middle child?
Lovely. And terribly at the same time. Sometimes I said, I am like a sandwich in between you two. I'm the boys, and because there are two boys as well, it felt like I was in the middle. But it was also lovely because I felt like I had a different relationship with both of them. And nice for the majority of it. And of course, I did have the times where we did disagree. But we also had the times where we did get along.
So did you have to play boys game, or were you able to play traditional girl game?
The expectation is that I played traditional girls game, but it was so fun to see your sister beating up the boys or doing things that the boys were doing, and so I did play that role, and I felt it was a little bit of a game to me. So I did the ballet, and then I went and did the judo as well, and I graduated. I got my brown belt in judo, close to get my black belt, and I did ballet for 15 years. So I felt that I was living a little bit of both worlds.
And did you torture your brothers, or did they torture you? Did you get along? What happened?
This was interesting because I felt in some ways as the girl overly protected in that sense. It wasn't in other ways, but in that sense I felt. So if my father especially knew that the boys were playing rough, he would intervene. So I used to say, when they're gone, we go and play fight.
And leave no blood.
And leave no blood. Yes, that was always the rule. And now you're going to see where this is coming from, where these rules are building up in my life.
So you had other friends?
Yes, growing up, I had other friends. I had one major friend, Maite. That was my friend from the age of 4 all the way up until I was just about
and there was
high
a special
school.
Connection with her father as well, wasn't there?
Yes, he was the pediatrician that then was present in my daughter's Julia's delivery. And still get in touch from time to time. Haven't been able to see her yet, but it's lovely because if it was a friendship that also included the whole family. So our parents were friends as well.
Noticing the difference between your own childhood growing up in Brazil and then watching our own children, but actually grow up in England. What were kind of the differences that you noticed?
There were so many differences, and also I think it was the time, because when I talk back to Sally and even all the friends that Sally's English anyway, but my other friends that I met in England that were from Europe, so Eva, Celine, and even Nautical, we felt there were so many similarities, and even our childhood, when I talk about it, growing up in the 70s in England, going up in the 70s in Brazil.
It's kind of expectations that were put on us that weren't present for our kids.
Yes.
And as a child, do you remember any of your childhood dreams and ambitions?
This is a funny one because we joke about it. And I was absolutely fascinated by the English language, and I really wanted, I at times wanted so much more to be able to speak English. And of course, Portuguese was natural because it was my first language. So I do remember pretending to my dolls and having all the dolls lined up and as if we were in a classroom and just blabbing, blah, 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 pretending to talk in English. So that was a big thing. And also I had this joke that I would marry an English lord.
Well, that failed.
No! I still married an English. Don't know about the lord, but...
And then, of course, massive tragedy.
Yes. And that was already at the time I was a young woman, I would say. I was 21 and my mum became quite ill and very quickly decayed in a few months.
I believe it was breast cancer, wasn't it?
Breast cancer. So from January when we actually found out and August when she passed away. So that was very quickly. It was my third year at the university. So
you were
I was
22
already,
when she died.
I was 22 when she died. So 21 when we found out she was ill. And she was my age, so 49 to 50. And for a long time that still played different kind of roles in my development.
And how much of that had an impact on your well-being in this sense of, I know you as a person, and you didn't crumble. No. I know that you picked yourself up and moved on. So how much of that actually do you feel influenced you and pushed you to become that person you are today?
Yeah, a lot, and so many other things that came before as well, and so much to do with the upbringing I had, and it was interesting now when we look back, of course, like what do you say about the guru, hindsight guru?
Yeah. You've got the hindsight guru going on.
Look back and think, whoa, yeah, I knew. No, at the time it was challenging, but it wasn't necessarily because my mum had passed away, what I would do without my mother. But wow, my life changed drastically. All our lives changed drastically. And I remember her becoming ill started the chain of changes. And that meant I had up to then had lived in one or two places throughout my whole life. And from that year onward, I moved houses and places almost yearly on an annual basis. I got to challenge myself more, and I got to go to England the year after. So yeah, there was a lot of changes. And so when you talk about well-being, this is where now this is for me a focus.
Right. So we're talking through the rules. We're talking through with Dani, giving you a little bit of an insight into Dani, who she is, where she's come from, why she's moving into this area of well-being, and the evolution from what you may have known her to be to who she is today. The three rules that we're looking at are rules 7, 8, and 9, which is 7, pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. Rule 8, tell the truth, or at least don't lie. And rule 9, assume that the person you are listening to might know something that you don't. So we're going to go back to this rule 7, which is pursue what is meaningful and not what is expedient, and take you back. Like you mentioned, we're in Piracicaba, and this is where you came to study agronomy or agricultural science. And tell us about that, because in the UK, we study at university and it's 3 years. But in Brazil, it's a 5-year course. Yeah. So it's longer. It's certainly not expedient, and you have to be very, very dedicated
Yeah.
to this. And then, of course, like you said, in the middle of this, you had to deal with the tragedy of your mother's own death.
Yeah.
So, tell us about studying here.
It was not necessarily my first pick. I thought I wanted to do a course that was at the time related to food. So it was an engineering course, but it was around food production. And after 2 years studying in Piracicaba, doing what we call it cursing, which is a it would be an A-level.
It's A-level. It's like
Yeah.
a university entrance exam, A-level type thing.
And I didn't get the grades, or I didn't pass to go to this specific, and I would only apply to that one. It's a little bit more like the American system, where you apply to the university that you are. So we do something like 5, 6, 7, 4 to 5 hours each exam, and I was doing just this one only exam to this university. And this is where I actually had a nice conversation with my father, who studied here as well, and he's an agricultural engineer like myself. And he said, why don't you actually do it here, and also then pursue this side of the food? And it was great, and I did it, and I passed first year. It was fantastic. I've met one of my best friends that is actually Julia's also mother-in-law, and did the course and loved it very, very much.
And of course, again, like I say, I know you, and you didn't use this excuse of the tragedy of your mother's death to crumble and say, poor me, and what can I get on this? I know that you actually took a meaningful course and buckled down and said, I'm going to do this.
Yes, I did.
How did your mindset change from studying before and studying afterwards?
I think the mindset itself, if we look at what Carol Dweck says about having an open mindset and challenge yourself, I don't think that has changed. What I think is that I didn't take light any other obstacle. Where before, I'll just give a silly example, but where before I used to think, we moved in just a year after I started the university, or I moved away from home. My parents moved into an apartment. And I remember going back home to this apartment and thinking, oh, well, it's not the same as having a house. And I had a dog that I couldn't bring it with me to the university course. So he stayed at home with my mom at the time. And I remember thinking, oh, terrible, because the dog wasn't happy. My mother now had to look after this dog. She said, we're going to have to rehome. And I thought, oh, terrible, horrible thing you're going to make me go through and choose to put my dog in a, choose a new family. And when I think about what happened a few years after that with my mum passing, that was nothing.
Mm-hmm.
That it kind of put things in perspective. And in neuroscience, we use this term that we say when you're going through suffering or grieving, there is a clean way and there's a dirty way. And the clean way is when you look at it and you find the resilience and you think, that's fine, it's hard, it's painful, but I choose to find a way around it. I choose, like I say, and my dear friends in England will know, choose to smile. I choose to smile. I choose to be happy in the sense that, not necessarily happy, but I choose to smile through this.
And grief is real. So, for example, you can lose a set of keys and you can feel grief because it's causing a frustration. And you can lose a parent. The grief is real, but like you say, it's important to get the perspective in. Is that although the emotion,
that's it,
the actual impact,
and in the neuroscience view, this dirty grief is when we look at it as, this is the end of the world. I don't want to get up anymore. Oh, it all happens to me. Always happens to me. And that that is when we lose perspective, and that can become quite difficult.
And also to remember, not to put a light on it, but death is a part of life.
Yeah. And it did feel like that. It felt like I had to go through it. I had to go through everything else that came before, and I had to go through everything else that went afterward. Not as fate, but as a process of understanding myself. And I'm jumping ahead a bit, but this is it.
How do you not feel bitter? And how do you even feel grateful?
Such a beautiful word, because I woke up thinking about that a lot today, and to be grateful.
You're never grateful for the death, of course, but actually,
No. I mean, grateful for the life I have.
And the life of your mother.
Grateful for so much, so grateful for the strong presence I still have of the memories we spent together. And you know that, because I say that often. And our children know her, even though they never knew her. And you never know. You've never known her, but it's just... there's so much that it still touches me. I think about her, but I got a bit lost in what you have actually asked, because
that's fine, because that's the lovely thing, because you get caught in these really happy memories and nice feelings, and suddenly you're meandering off. And I personally believe that's part of the feeling of gratefulness.
Yes.
Not bitterness. Is that what were you saying?
Because, but I do remember now that what kind of grounded me was my faith, and I'm just gonna leave it there now, because I know this is something quite grandiose, meaning quite big, something that we will discuss in another time. But it was my faith. It was the fact that I believed. So not just faith. Now we're looking into believing and beliefs. But and it was a surprise to a lot of people. And interestingly, that's another thing that really make a mark on me, is when people used to look at me and think, you will crumble. And I thought, wow, that's almost like a wish. And I'm really sad that you're wishing me to crumble.
And this is going back even to this idea of not expedient, what's meaningful. Because expedient is something that's nice and it's good, and I want an immediate solution. But the immediate solution is not the meaningful
What is
one.
coming now from this, when you say that, is that it was very meaningful to know that I wouldn't have my mother to continue helping me, maybe, or just to be there, to be part of what I was choosing to do in life. But there was not a moment where I thought I wasn't the one making these choices. And one thing, and this is something that I've learned from that very young, very early age, even before her passing, was that happiness is not within the place, the person. Happiness is within me. And now I changed that into well-being, because happiness is only looking at one emotion, and we are made of so many more to keep balance.
And then you chose to come to study English in England, in Hastings,
English.
of all places. How did that come about, and how did it feel stepping off the plane for the very first time on a very cold and wet December day?
That was the beginning of my kind of desire to challenge myself. At that moment, my mom was gone, and I thought, this was tough, but I've made through. So now I'm going to look at everything else I really, truly desire, and it's tough. And up to now, I didn't feel brave enough to do it, and I'm going to do it. And going to England was a big, big dream of mine. And learning English was, it's hard to not being emotional now. I'll kick you from under the table.
Well, you see, when I met you, and back in the December of 1998, 97, sorry, 97.
Just a year after my mum's death.
You were very, very focused.
So much.
Very focused. But it wasn't just focused in a tough, strict, self accusative way. It was, no, I'm here and I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
Because I remember asking you on so many occasions to drop lessons in the afternoon and come to the cinema or go to the park and go there, and your answer was always,
I've got to study.
No, I've got to study. And it wasn't an expedient, because you could have had an experience in England of, going out, doing this, going to pubs, doing that, but you knew what was meaningful, and the meaning thing for you was to raise your English level.
That's just so clear, isn't it? And in so many other things, to go for what is meaningful. That was meaningful. That was something that I've always wanted. And interestingly, because when you have an ambition, and I'm going to use a word that is actually so many times not singing good light, but when you have an ambition that is not going to go through anyone or around, and this is just the other beauty thing about English language, because you can talk about things going through, going around, going over, and Portuguese language doesn't allow me to use so many
and you can go with people as well. So your ambition that goes with people.
Yes, that was it. I knew that for me, but I wasn't interfering with your business or with your plans. No, please go ahead, Steve. I'm actually very happy that you're going to go to the pub and have a great time. And I don't feel inclined or obliged to come just because you invited me. I've got things to do and I'm going to go and do them.
Well, you actually had a different ambition then, because I remember your ambition then was to get your English, but also then to get your Italian passport, to move to Italy and become a lecturer in an Italian university. That all changed, didn't it?
Yeah, no, but I actually, above all, that was one of the ways. But what I wanted was to actually get a master's and then do a postgraduate degree and teach. That was the thing. And I felt that the way to get to teaching was to get that postgraduate. And this is, again, when you are still meaningful and no experience, because it wasn't going to live in Italy, it wasn't to go and get the passport. It was very specific. It was to allow me to become a lecturer and to become a teacher.
And I will remember that when you told me this, that's always stayed in the back of my mind, and it sort of just bubbled away.
Yeah,
and a few years later, and it bubbled away.
He just remembered, he just linked to that movie we were watching just yesterday. I know when you were going to be watching this show, it's not going to be the yesterday that it was for us, but it's having that focus and knowing that.
And that drive.
Yeah.
And on there.
Yeah.
What lessons of well-being and things from your childhood and this up until that point do you bring forward to your clients, or do you bring forward actually to our kids as well?
There were so many, and there were so many from my upbringing, and then I would say from my mom and from my dad. There were some from seeing things that I didn't think it was leading to well-being from my point of view, from my perspective. And then, of course, I saw that as a child, and I revisited that as an adult to see if it was the same sort of an interpretation. But some of them that were actually really powerful and empowering was things that my dad said, such as don't make it of a problem, a little problem, a big problem. So that kind of perspective. Yeah. And there were some from my mom that she used to say, don't make it your fear someone else's fear. And this was on upbringing. So for the children, it was always very nice when she said, I am afraid that you might get hurt, and no, you will get hurt, stop that. And that was very important to me. And only recently, Steve, me and you with my father opened up a box of little treasures my mom had kept, and this 27th years after her death, and I found in there something I never knew that she had done a course on child psychology just before or after becoming a mother. And that speaks so loudly, isn't it? Look at that, how beautiful it is, because she had been shown by someone a way that she believed in, and this is how we grew up. So I loved that about her. I loved that she would say, it's your choice, but there are consequences to that.
And it is lovely that we can bring the balance and the well-being, because we can bring all of those experience forward into our kids. And one of the things we have always told them is we've told them, put the hard effort in. Don't go for the short-term quick fix. No, go for that.
If it's hard, work harder. Oh, tough, isn't it? Some ways, the tough love. Yeah, but we put it into a context.
So we're talking today with Dani. We're going to find out a little bit more from her, where she's from, what makes her tick, how she's got to be what she's doing today. And of course, again, we're framing it around the Peterson's rules. These ones are 7, 8 and 9. We've just discussed pursuing what is meaningful and not what is expedient. Now we're going to have a look at rule 8, which is about tell the truth or at least don't lie. And I want to frame this now into when we moved in 2002, we moved to the UK and started living in England. And the way that I want to frame it is I'm going to go back to 1994 when I moved for the first time and I lived in Italy. And one of the things that I found that living in Italy was so refreshing that I was outside my culture. So there was no cultural expectations. I was meeting people who knew nothing about me.
Yeah.
And therefore they couldn't bring their baggage and expectations onto me. And I actually found this very liberating. And in terms of not lying, at least tell the truth and not lying, it was the first time that I felt that I didn't need to lie to myself and I could actually be free and find out the person who I was and what I liked. Was it the same for you when we came to the UK?
Not in the same way. And I think within that context that you've put, to be really truth to myself, it was then after the 18 years that we lived that and 2020. So that's when I felt coming back to Brazil and being really, really true to myself. But it was always a wish. And I remember meeting you in 97 and being refreshing and thinking, well, I am not Daniela Casagrande now. You don't know. You can meet Daniela. And that was just so refreshing.
Yes, because one of the things that they do here in Brazil, they say, what's your name? And you say
Daniela.
And they say, no, what's your family name?
Yeah.
Who is your parents?
Yes.
And then they
Where
start.
do you come from? It's like
that's it.
They
oh,
like
is your dad
look,
this and does your dad that? And suddenly all of these cultural and social prejudices are put onto you and they're now dictating who you are.
And then I remember being 12 or 13. I just remember being very young and going to my father's work to meet with him. And he said, when you arrive, let them know that you are here. And I took that by literal, and I deliberately got there and I said, I'm Daniela, I'm here waiting for Dumas. And they asked me to sit down and I waited for nearly an hour. So when he came out and he saw I was there, why didn't you say I was here? I said, I did say I was here. Did you say you were my daughter? I said, no. And it was a little bit of my rebel, if you can say it. I don't think I was, but it was prickly. Oh, I got that. Yes. It was my prickly side thinking, well, they should let me in, even though, they should have allowed me to come in and see or should have told you. And that was so much expectation. That is so much me as that young girl kind of thinking, oh, well, a lot to do with the age, I get it. But years on, and I've understood that.
So when we were in England, you were able to be true for yourself in your career. The first one you wanted to do, and you were very strong and clear with this, is you wanted to work within your graduation, within your agriculture area. So
Yes.
tell about that experience.
That was those kind of misconceptions. You're saying about being truth to myself. But how can I be truth to someone that I don't know yet? That's now my hindsight guru looking back and think, I actually was still trying to find out who I was. And this becomes a big thing for me and helping others to find their true selves. Yes.
Was it nice working in that factory environment?
It wasn't nice. It was necessary.
And that's an interesting thing. I have done jobs that I didn't like, but I took because I wanted to do it to find out what it was about. One was bar work, and one was working in an office. I wanted to see what it was all about. Hated it, glad I did it, because now I know that wasn't for me.
It was a little bit about finding out about the job, but it was more to find about myself. I had just arrived in England. It was a year to the date that Julia became a year old. So she was 1 year, 1 day, the day I started working. I didn't know the culture very well. I didn't know the language very well. I had a degree, and I felt that's going to be my way in, because if I don't know the language and the culture, I will have to explore what I do know, which is my job. My degree will help me some way. I'm going to use this knowledge of something that we have in common. What happened as well is that at that time I had just kind of got to the other end of a postnatal depression, which I had gone through in a new country with new people, putting a huge amount of pressure on you as the family provider, and with 2 young children and a wife. So it was my turn, and I thought, I'm going to go out now. I'm going to make something out of this, and I'm going to have an income, and I'm going to help, and I'm going to provide to our family as well. And it showed much more about me and my character than the job itself.
But you didn't like it, and after conversation, we decided to regroup and rethink, which is an important thing, because it's not always about pushing forwards. Sometimes you need to prune the tree, chop it back to allow it to grow again fresh. And I always remember you wanted this dream to teach, and it wasn't quite teaching, and the language wasn't quite there, but you had all of this. And I went back into teaching, and in order to it, you went out and got yourself qualified to be a childcare provider at home.
I did, and that gave me the time and the income and the experience. The time not only to be with the children, but the time to also get all my documents translated and get in contact with NARIC and get all the documentation, which at that time felt quite onerous, when you don't know language, culture, and all of that, and you're trying to do it. And I will bring now, because there's someone that I think was a very good friend at that time and helped me through this process, which was our neighbor Becky and her family, and at that time living just across the road to us. They were good, and she was a good friend at that time that was just across the road. And of course, throughout all of these and the numerous conversations I had with Sally, trying to find out what was happening to me, who I was, and now a mother, a wife in a different country, now looking after other children's family, other families' children, and that was just amazing. It was wonderful, very challenging, but wonderful.
And then our children grew, they went to school, and that moment of truth came, because I remembered that you wanted to be a teacher.
Yeah.
So therefore, an opportunity arose.
Yes.
And said, come on, it's not going to be a teacher in Italy, but how about being a secondary school teacher in the United Kingdom?
So
tell us about that.
So scary. And then also deciding, because there would be a kind of comfortable way to go and teach modern foreign languages, which for a foreign with a Latin-based language,
and that was the presumption of choice, wasn't it? But of course, it had nothing to do with you and who you were.
No.
And the lovely thing is, you training to be a science teacher was the perfect marriage between your science degree here, your ambition to teach, and your new professional lifestyle in England.
Yeah.
And you also met another group of friends who happened to be other language. You were on that course with Celine and Eva.
And it's just this beauty about life and synchronicity, and you ended up meeting these lovely people.
How did they help you and support you as you went, or each other actually through this?
I truly think it was each other, because we're still friends and I still love them to bits. But at that moment, when I actually was inspired by them, and I was not only inspired by them being also foreign and doing the best that they could there, but also I felt, I cannot do this. I was so scared, but I cannot do this, because
that's that going right back to the first podcast of saying the posture, the mental.
Amazing how these kind of my own at the time set of rules were helping me to guide me through, in some ways helping me when things were tough, or sometimes helping me to toughen up. And it felt a little bit like that. And that just, there were 15 years of teaching in England, but the first 3 were very challenging. Then it became a bit easier. The 5th year specifically, it was the 3rd going to 4th. I've met someone at work that used this sentence, and it was a lead that I helped to interview, and he said, you got to toughen up. And I remember thinking, you got no idea how tough I am. But
Judo.
Yeah. If you need to see more tough, I show you more tough. And that was always the thing. It was never, I would do this to prove you wrong. I would do this because, yes, I understood. I got the message. I've got to show you that. I actually got to show the word, and I will do it.
And of course, the other thing that you said that you wanted to do is continue studying, and you get these postgraduates.
Yeah.
You did anyway, by, because the thing that you loved was the further research of teaching and learning.
Yeah.
And you did get those further qualifications
Any
in that.
opportunity I had, and the system in England allowed for that CPD, for that continuous training, and I did everything that was. And if there was an opportunity, and then my last colleagues and some friends from Y school would know, is there someone that can do that? Yeah, I can. You've never done that, but I can do it. Is there anyone else that can do it? No one else wants, so I do. And I would do it, and I think that's been always my kind of rule.
Remembering as well that you are culturally Brazilian, how much of that were you able to be true to yourself whilst living in England?
I didn't know how much until quite towards the end, because I've made very clear that I was Brazilian, and I've never wanted not to be a Brazilian. And that was lovely, especially because my grown-up children now are living in Brazil, and they feel Brazilian, more than they actually can show.
And the lovely thing is like we said before, we actually ended up by chance with so many mixed nationality cultural friends and things, and with Lisa being German, Noriko Japanese, Eva Spanish, Celine French, and then of course you've got Marina Brazilian, and what was absolutely lovely about it all is that nobody wanted anyone to be anything but who they were, because my goodness, why would we?
I didn't always felt that most people, apart from our friendship group as well, but most people in England felt it this way, kind of most people that I had something to do. So it's a very small percentage of the nation. But I think there was something interesting about being a foreigner, and they didn't know exactly what it was. I just didn't make a big issue of it, but I wanted people to know. So my lessons were a great opportunity to talk a little bit about being from a different culture and how, and I always use that in my favor. And I do remember, and it was head of department at the school where you were teaching at the time that said, you are Brazilian, use it towards your
use it in for your favor. Just by chance as well. I mean, a lot of the family on my mother's side.
Yes, you've always had that, didn't you? You have
my aunt who is French.
Yeah.
So my cousins are half. My uncle who is Spanish.
Yeah.
So actually bringing into that fold, you know, we now got a Brazilian. Okay, welcome to the party.
Welcome to the party. And I did feel welcomed. I still do. It's fantastic. It's a brilliant culture in your family, and it's very much welcoming, and I've never felt out of place. I felt that was the place, actually.
Balanced and well-being.
Yeah, balanced and well-being.
So we're talking again with Dani, doing a little bit more, getting to know her a bit more for you guys who may have forgotten who she is, if that's possible, or just wanting to know just a little bit more behind the smile on this. And as always, we're framing it around these Jordan Peterson rules. We've looked at 7, which is it pursues something meaningful and not expedience, and we've just looked at rule number 8, tell the truth, or at least not tell lies. And we've used it to talk around Dani's growing up and the time in England. And now we get to the last one for today, which is rule 9, which is assume that the person you are listening to might know something that you don't.
Yeah.
And we're going to frame this one about returning back to Brazil.
Yeah.
And we've been here now 3 years, and this 3-year continuous, let's say, journey that has brought you from the person you were in England to rediscover who you needed to be in Brazil, to move on to the person that you wanted to be this person that you are. Why did we move back, Dani?
Oh, because we had to. that was tough. It was tough having had the chance to feel like we could choose what we wanted to do, to somewhere where we felt we had no choice,
and we had to.
Yeah, and that
basically it was my health issue. I was diagnosed with a benign tumor in my head, in my brain. I had the surgery. The recovery on terms of medical grounds was 100% perfect, but actually the impact on my own life of who I was and what I could do before surgery and after surgery, it was a 180 turn, and it was getting to the point where actually it was no longer sustainable. So we looked at all the options and decided the option, including all of the impact that it would do on my family, our friends, our children's opportunity, our income, everything. And we came back. But you've got to the place now where you're in this nutrition and mentoring, and you've moved from potentially a high school principal to now a neuropsychologist, and helping people and going into companies and looking at their HR and doing all of this. Tell us about that transition.
It is back to number 8 rule: tell the truth, or at least don't lie. At least don't lie. I think that I was in that moment. I chose.
You mean for yourself?
Yeah. I chose the day I left England not to lie. The day I decided that we were going to leave, I decided not to lie. And having lived away from things that at times were hurtful, or just I didn't know the meaning exactly when.
You mean in Brazil?
In Brazil, and having stayed in England for so long and having a new meaningful life, there were things that were forgotten.
I certainly think we came back with our eyes open, and we had conversations amongst us, between us, to say, okay, things are going to happen and we need to be prepared, and not lie and just go with the flow. Yeah. Not be horrible. No. And put people out. Yeah. But hold our grounds and say, that's interesting, but we're going this way.
But we're going this way. I described this as something that was once described to me, and this is how I look at times. Someone once described that they are like an arrow, that they can just go in a straight line. I don't like to think that this could hurt people along the way, but I like to think that I fly like a butterfly. Not that's where I got my butterfly. I like a butterfly. I like to find that balance, and sometimes I go back into becoming
another beautiful thing about the butterfly. Remember, it even has to die to itself.
Exactly.
It was a caterpillar. It has to die to itself and reconstruct its own life to be that
and
butterfly.
My phoenix, that's the other tattoo that I keep it, because it is that kind of idea of, rebuilding and rebirth. But this is really lovely, and coming back to Brazil has helped me to go back around this rule 9. Assume that the person that you are listening to might know something you don't, and all the times being like that. I'm meeting fantastic people that have got so much to teach me, but in a sense, not that hypocritical sense, we've got something to learn from everyone. No, it's really learning about myself, and it's helping me to become a better person and being truthful.
So why did you choose neuropsychology?
Colleague, you've been there, haven't you? Since the day I arrived in Brazil, I'm thinking, I would like to do a postgraduate. What am I going to study? What am I going to do? I want it to be meaningful. Like everything I do, I want it to have a meaning. Over-analyzing, go back to that first conversation. And I felt it was a way to understand people, because the neuroscience uses a base, which I know is something that we discuss often. What is the norm? Maybe, yes, there's philosophical ways to say there is not the norm, but there is a brain function. And what is the brain function bringing us? So what is the behavior around that? That was it. It's
also a little bit of a continuation of your teaching and learning, because part of teaching and learning, you have to know how somebody learns, which means you have to know how they think, how they motivate them, and how to structure. And now it just moves it into an adult environment.
In the teaching and learning, the interesting thing was when in the last few years of teaching, we start looking at principles and innovative methodologies, which was really looking at concepts, tools, and how to support someone's learning in a sustainable way, and also to make it permanent.
So how do you bring that into your mentoring, into your sessions with adults, with nutrition, with HR, with anything today.
It's incredible. Sometimes I feel myself in the Matrix. I'm looking at someone and all these images are popping up. I use everything. I take the children-centered, which is the student-centered learning. So when I'm with someone, that's it. They are my focus. I'm
an adult, you mean?
Yeah. Now it's an adult's. A few exceptions. I still work with children, but the adult, when I'm looking at this adult, I'm looking, you're my focus, and everything we're going to do is going to support you in your journey.
And how important in your new role is it to listen to what they're saying?
I'm actually learning more and more to do this active learning. Active listening, and being amazing, because now I've learned to listen to the words, to observe the behavior, to kind of combine that into bringing it back to the person. You're saying that, you're showing that. Is that really what you mean? This triangulation.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because, listening, it means what are we talking about with the neurolinguistics behind what the person is saying, the emotions, but also we can listen to their body language as well.
So incredible. Of course, we're talking about listening and hearing, looking and seeing. Is this attention that, and I am honestly developing that, this mindfulness of being in front of that person and focused entirely on what they have to do, say, and what they are bringing. It's incredible. I'm loving it.
It's one of those things, isn't it, that actually in terms of output, we've got a mouth. But in terms of input, we got pairs. Yeah. So even if we just the listening, it's 2 versus 1. Yeah. Seeing, and we add all of that on. Yeah. And actually, in terms in this, it's more important to listen than to just talk and provide these solutions, isn't it?
The other thing that is very interesting is that you listen along the days, because I don't see a person only once, and it is like the teaching was built. You see someone for a period of time, and when I see them over a period of time, what they are saying, what they are showing, I'm writing it down to remind me, because I am so involved in what they are saying that if I'm not taking notes, I might not remember. I actually don't have to remember, which is the beauty of it all. I am learning about the person by experiencing that. So going to the learning cycle of the corpse. But it's all so interesting. There's no way that my learning throughout the teaching career and life and everything else, it culminated in being here.
And so people listening to this and watching, we have our friends, we have our colleagues, we have our husbands, wives, partners, we have our children and our parents. And a lot of the time we say, right, when I'm going to see them, I'm going to tell them what's what. But actually, how important is it, rather than to tell the other person what's what, than to actually just listen and understand what's going on?
It's positioning, and then we go back to one of the rules right at the beginning is posture, and it is often a case of this is my truth, this is your truth. We're not talking about a law here, we're not talking about following being right or wrong. We're talking about my point of view, your point of view, my perception, your perception. And what I've learned, and I really can say I have learned, is to distance myself. And when I distance myself, I'm occupying a different position, a different place, and I'm in a different posture. And then I can see from your point of view and my point of view. And it is at times, Steve, as simple as, I'll write a number here, that's 6. So I'm looking at a number 6. You in front of me, what number can you see if I am seeing a 6?
Exactly. I'll see an upside down semicolon.
Just to be difficult.
I'll see a spaceship. The aliens are coming.
I'll bring it back. But if I see a 6, what do you see?
82. 9, Dani. Sorry.
Thank you. He will pay for that.
I will listen. I promise.
That's 2 points of view, and sometimes that's it. And
it's the elephant analogy. There was that lovely show that we watched, and I use it on my Google account. It's Ted Lasso who says, "Be curious, not judgmental." And how many people want to tell us what's rather than actually ask us what's going on.
The thing is that when we say be curious, not judgmental, in English, and honestly, it works so very well, but it doesn't translate very well. That's why I go with the numbers analogy. But it's just because, again, a number is absolute. There is no question here. If I see a 6, you see a 9. What I actually mean by that, especially with the clients, look, there is a different point of view to that. But as long as you're being true to yourself, we're going to carry on that,
Cool. So, thank you, Dani. I mean,
thank you.
Hopefully, we've learned a lot more about you, about what motivates you, about what we're doing here, and about the work that you're doing, and why it's not just suddenly a flick switch career change from this to this. Actually, it's a graduation. It's an evolution that's got to this point. And so, yes, through this we've discussed Peterson again through rules 7 to 9, which was pursue what is meaningful and not expedient. Where we've looked at hard work and dedication and again being true to yourself, which is rule 8, and at least not lie, which is hold on and find that bit and find out who you are and then go with it. And then finally rule 9, which is assume other people you're listening to know something you don't, which is taking that time just to sit back and listen to what they're saying, internalize it and move forward with them, and not just come in with your own
and
bits.
Be curious, ask more questions. Definitely, that's the way to do it. Why do you think so?
And talking of ask more questions, please ask questions in the comments. Leave comments, like and subscribe, and anything that you'd like to put forward to ask either me or Dani or any other suggestions, please do. Dani, thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Obrigada por Canal de Piracicaba, por essa oportunidade para nós também.
Sim.
So thank you for the Piracicaba channel for giving us this opportunity. We hope you liked it. We hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned a lot more about Dani as well. And we'll see you on the next podcast.
Let's put well-being into action. See you next week.